Hi everyone, this is Ricky with Bromero Cards, and I'm back showing you a card I made with the Sweet Stamp Shop stamp set, Cherry Lucky. This is a great company who has planner and card making images, and you should check them out. Okay, so let's get started. We are going to start out with some Canson watercolor paper. This paper can be found at your local craft store, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, whichever. You're just going to cut a piece out that can fit all the stamps. We're going to use the geisha, the bonsai tree, the lamp, and the cherry blossoms. I'm going to coat that with my anti-static tool so that no embossing powder stays on the paper. And I'm going to use some VersaFine ink. This ink is really good for watercoloring. I used my Misty because I never get a good impression on the first time on water paper or watercolor paper. And as you can see, it took 3 times to actually get a good one, and towards the end, there's still some space there. You do not have to use the embossing powder to do this because the ink actually, it's permanent, so the watercolor, it won't smear when you do your watercoloring. But I like to add it. It makes the ink seem a little darker, and it makes it easier for when you're watercoloring that the colors don't mix into each other. There's kind of like a well on the paper, so there's a place for the water to sit as you're watercoloring. So I'm just heat embossing this really quick here. I tried to speed this up as fast as I could. I'm going to have to change the way I film this because it kind of looks like I'm doing claymation here. Especially once you see me going faster, because some of these are like 16 times as fast. This is an instance for that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tape my images down to my cutting board. This is just a cheap cutting board I got at, I don't know, like Walmart or Target or somewhere. Doesn't have to be super expensive, but just something that you can move the paper around with and you can tape down to. You could also use a plastic one. I use wood because I use the heat tool on it, and I'm afraid the plastic might melt. We're going to use some real brush markers. These are watercolor markers. They're really nice. We're going to start out with her kimono, I believe is what it's called. And basically what I'm doing is just taking the blue and putting it along the edges. And then I'm going to take the water and just spread that out along the image. Watercoloring can be very intimidating. I'm not very good at it. And I've had to watch a bunch of YouTube videos to learn how to do this. So don't feel like that you have to be an expert as soon as you start watercoloring. I'm going to take the light pink and then I'm going to do the umbrella. And as you'll see through this video, you're going to see that I actually go over the image several times because I felt like it was not spreading as well as I wanted to along the paper. Again, I'm not an expert, so it's a big learning curve, and it really can be simple, but then sometimes it just doesn't work your way. So I'm going to continue to spread the pink out onto the umbrella, and then the next color, I believe I think I'm going to go back to the blue in this next scene here. I actually dried it a little bit with the tool. Okay, and then I'm going to go outline a little more, and I'm going to spread out a little bit more. I felt it wasn't dark enough along the lines. Another good tip about using the embossing, the clear embossing on this is sometimes you don't want the ink to necessarily go onto the image, but you can put a little bit on that embossing line and then use that to put your ink across the image. So I'm going back again and I'm adding more pink. And then I believe this is a light carmine or red. And then I'm just add a thin line along the outside of her hair and her ears. And then I'm just going to spread that out a little more. There's not a lot there, but it's enough to make it look a little darker, actually. And now, right after this, we're going to start working on her kimono again. We're going to use some gold glitter watercolor. It's the red gold. And I actually put a light coat of this on the kimono at first. It's not really dark, and you may not even be able to see this right now. But I put a couple coats on it, and then later on in the video, you're going to see that I go back and darken it up a little bit. And then also, the good thing is with watercoloring, for example, you just saw me take out a little piece of the blue that was in the gold. As long as your paper's still wet, you can pretty much use a towel, paper towel, anything that can soak, that can get the water off the paper, and it's pretty much your eraser. So that's always forgiving as well. And then later on, you're going to see me use that same technique to get rid of some of the red. Then we're going to use some white gold here. I'm putting this on the tips of the umbrella to add a little shimmer to this. I also go back later on and add some more to this because I felt it wasn't as shimmery as I wanted it to be. In most of the videos, I'm using just a small brush that has a fine tip, and then I believe that's a number 4, and then the other brush may be a number 8. I heat dry this again, and then I believe I go back and probably add a little more. Oh, this is where I'm taking off the red and the pink that came out of the lines. You just use your clear water and then you use your towel and you can soak that up. And then I believe I add a little more because it was still too light. Then I'm going to add some more pink here and spread it out because still it doesn't feel as dark as it should. When a watercolor dries, it usually dries lighter than what it actually is while it's wet. So that's when you discover that you need to add a little more to that. And then I'm going to use the red. I'm going to start coloring in the cherry blossoms. And I use red for all of that. And then I go in and take some water and just spread those out. They're pretty small, so you can't really use multiple colors in that. You will see that I go back and add a little more red into the middle of the flowers because they just needed more of a focal point inside the flower rather than just be like a red wash. So you're going to see me here just spread that out with some water once I get all of it done. And I'm just going to take a little bit of water for each flower and spread it out. Really not that hard. They're not that big, so they're pretty easy to color in. And this watercolor for the whole image is actually pretty simple. You're not using a lot of mixes of colors, so that makes it pretty easy. It's just straightforward, pretty much just moving the color onto the image. I'm going to go back and I'm going to work on her kimono again and add some more gold watercolor here. That was the red gold. And you probably didn't need to add more blue, but I just add because I'm pretty much playing around. I don't take it too seriously, so I could have stopped way before, but I decided just to continue. And then here in a second, you're going to see that I actually have too much water on my paper, so I'm going to use my towel to soak some of that up. And you can see it actually lightens the paper quite a bit. I'm just going to use a little bit of the extra water, dry off my brush, and then spread that around again. And now I'm going to start working on the lantern. It's pretty much the same. I'm going to use the blue. I'm going to outline the flower and around the sides of the lantern. And what I'll do is I'll just take some water and spread that out. I just use straight color on the bottom tassel. It wasn't even worth blending in with water. So you're going to see me do that. And I believe here also I get a little red in the blue, and I think I remove it. Can't remember when I was, there we go, yeah. So it was actually starting to turn purple inside the lantern. So I took a little bit of the blue from the tassel and actually used it onto the image. And now this is where I go back and add a little red to the centers of the flowers. I don't even spread this out. I just add a little bit just to add what seems to be dimension. And then I'm going back here and adding a little more pink to the image. I spread that out just a little bit, I believe. Or actually I don't, I guess. Now we're going to color her face. I use the flesh color. And I'm just going to do a wash of the flesh color on her face. And then what I do is I take a lighter brown and add it around the lines of her face to show a little dimension, and then also just to make her face a little darker. She was really pale, so I believe she needed a little more color as well. So I'm going to do that really quick, And it doesn't take a lot of water actually to do this. And it actually doesn't even take a lot of the ink to get this look. So I'm going to finish that up. And then after this, I believe I start working on the bonsai tree. And next I'm going to start on the bark of the cherry blossom tree. So I just take a light brown and I'm going to lightly put some ink on this, or watercolor. Not a lot. These are small branches, so it doesn't take actually a lot to cover it. And I'm going to take the dark brown and just add a few spots, and then just take a light water and just spread that around until it looks even. I believe you'll see me go back in and just add a little bit of a darker brown just to make it look a little darker. Now I'm going to start on the bark of the bonsai tree, which is the same thing. There's barely any bark there. And I don't even believe I used water on this, I believe. Next I'm going to do the pot. I'm going to use light gray. I'm going to color that in completely. And then I'm going to take a dark gray and put it on both sides of the pot. And we're going to wash that in a little bit with some water. Off camera, I actually added a little more gray to this because I felt like it needed to be a little darker. And now we're going to start working on the bonsai tree. I'm just going to use a green. Place green along the bottom of the tree, spread that out with some water, and then I'm going to dry it. And then what I do is I take a darker green along the same lines, or actually there was a little bit, still too much water on it. I'm adding the darker green and then just spreading that out also with some water. You're just looking to give it a little dimension because it looks kind of flat when they're just the plain light green. And now I just take the deep blue and I'm going to do the collar of her kimono, which later on looks a little purple. I'm adding a little more blue to the lantern and then also to her kimono. Again, I didn't need to add it, but I did because it drives me crazy. And then I'm going to use a little white gold glitter watercolor and add that again to the image. I'm going to dry all of this. I didn't make you sit through all that. Adding a little bit more darker color to the tree bark, only because it dried a little light. So now I'm going to remove the tape, and I'm actually going to die cut these images out. Actually not die cut, I have a scan and cut, so I cut that out with that. I didn't show you that part. It's a little long and it just wasn't necessary. I'm going to trim up the lantern a little bit. It didn't come out the way I really liked it to be, so I'm just trimming that up a bit. And now it's time to start the actual card base of the card. This is a piece of craft paper. It's cut at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. This is a piece of washi paper. I really love this paper. It's kind of pricey, so I don't buy as much of it, but here's a few samples of what I do have. You can make some really nice cards with this paper. It's thin like washi, but it's not sticky on the back. But it's really nice, and you could probably find some at your local craft store or maybe like on Amazon. I would suggest if you can find it in a store, just looking at it. It's really nice. So now what I'm going to do is add some double-sided adhesive to this paper. I need this to be sticky on one side so that I could put the washi paper on the other side so that I could die cut this out. It takes me a few minutes because this double-sided paper or double-sided adhesive is pretty sticky. And actually I left this in, but this was kind of a waste of my time here because I actually end up taking the piece of paper and I actually cut it down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. I needed it to be smaller so that it could be on the card base with the craft paper showing towards the end, you will see. But here I am trimming, wasting my time, and then only for me to realize, oh, I'm going to be die cutting this out anyway. So I take my paper trimmer and I trim this up after I add the washi paper. Again, I have man hands, so it's kind of hard to get this, off the paper. So I get that off, and then you actually see how sticky it is. It keeps sticking in my finger, and I can't get it to stop. So I'm actually going to take it upside down and place it onto the washi paper. And then this is where I'm going to try to trim it again. Again, a waste of my time. This happens a lot when I'm making cards. I'm not for sure why I do this, but this could be why this video is also 22 minutes long. I wanted to keep the mistakes in because we all make mistakes. So this is where I'm going to trim this to 4 inches. I actually do a half of the cut here and then turn the paper around and do another cut, only because I wanted both sides to be even. I didn't want the adhesive to be uneven. And I'm going to do the same thing longwise. Do half the cut there and then half the cut on the other side, just so that I can have even sides with the adhesive. The next thing we'll use is the MFT wonky rectangle set. I'm going to use the second to biggest frame here, and I'm going to line this up to be even throughout the paper. And I'm just going to use some painter's tape. I used that previously for the watercolor, so I just ripped it up and used it for this. And then here I second guess the evenness of the frame because it's wonky. If you look at it, it's uneven naturally. So I was second guessing it. So I get that out. I'm going to take the paper off really carefully because this paper can rip really quickly. And I actually ripped a little bit of the blue off of there. You can't see it because there's white also, but it does happen. So now what I'm going to do is take a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of cardstock, and then what I'm going to do is line this up on the cardstock so it's even on all sides. And what I'm going to do is put some temporary adhesive on the back of this frame, because what I needed to do is stick down so that I can stick the center into the card. Once I get that centered, I'm going to lift that out, and I'm going to use some liquid glue adhesive to add this into the card. And the liquid glue just makes it easier to position it if you need to move it at any time. So now with the frame, what I'm going to do is take some 3D foam tape. I'm going to cut small pieces, and I'm going to place that along the frame because we're going to raise this off of the card. Keep those little strips. You can actually place it on the side of your 3D foam tube here, or your roll, and you can use it at a later time. That's what I always do, no matter what size, because you could always use it. And then here you see that I'm using the smaller versions that I had already cut to make this up. So now what I'm going to do is cut another short piece here, add that. We're going to glue that onto the cardstock. I'm adding some temporary adhesive to the back of this so that I can get it even. As you see the video go further, you're going to see the card, it's raising up actually because it's drying with the liquid adhesive. So I take some more temporary glue and I stick it on there so that I can place this on to be even. So now we're going to start putting the card together. So you're going to start seeing me actually position items onto the card, trying to figure out exactly how it should go on. I flip the paper around a few times, and then I just position everything on the card as I would like to see it. And I think I got a pretty good idea there. And now it's time to do the sentiment. This is just a random piece of paper that I had from the previous card I made. I'm going to take the Konnichiwa, and I'm going to stamp that in Versamark embossing ink. It's a clear ink, it's sticky. It makes the embossing powder stick to the card. I'm using some white embossing powder, and I'm going to heat that up. And then what I'm going to do is actually fussy cut this word out. There's not a die for it, and I didn't want it to be a straight wide piece of paper because I didn't want it to cover up the paper that I'm trying to show off in the card. So I just fussy cut around this. You could do this any way that you wanted to. I just did a couple curves around the word, and it worked out pretty good. Actually, you could have also done that probably on some vellum paper, and that would have looked nice as well because the paper would have shown up under that as well. Here I'm just positioning everything, making sure everything fits, and then I'm going to start adding 3D foam to all the pieces so that it could fit on the card. This isn't anything that's hard. I don't lay down the pieces permanently until I actually have everything down and where I want it to be. So I just add the foam tape to everything and then go from there. I'm going to glue down the bonsai tree. I'm going to add the word. I fool around with it a little bit because I think it's crooked, but it actually doesn't seem that it was. And then I'm going to place the girl down, but I don't press her down all the way yet, just in case. I add the cherry blossoms. I add some liquid glue to the corner because that's actually up above the frame. And we're just going to use some liquid glue to add this to the card base. It's 110 pound Nina cardstock, solar white. We're going to add that on there, and then we're completed with the card. I want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate your subscriptions to my channel, and I hope to bring more cards to you soon. I hope that you have a great week. I hope you enjoy this card, and if you do, please make sure you give me a thumbs up. And head over to Sweet Stamp Shop and make sure you order some of their stamps. They're really nice, and you could use them in planners. You can use them for cards. You can pretty much use them for anything you want, actually. Here are the two cards. The one card is what I was using to actually do the video with. I asked several people on on Facebook and Twitter, and they asked me to do this video. So have a great week, and we will see you soon. Bye.